Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Suicide Squad Isekai Season 1, Episode 3. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. You know, one of these days, I've got to remember that term. I always get it backwards. It's in media res, right? Or is it in res media? I always get that term backwards. You think how often it comes up during TV shows and stuff that I would get it right one of these days, but I never like solidify that in my brain. I always get that term backwards because we start at like, okay, they're already on the battlefield. Now we kind of rewind to find out how they got there. Cecil and his crew rolled up to the prison that is kind of run by the Suicide Squad as well as the monsters, and it's like, oh, this is the guy who captured us, and they're like, I forgot. Oh yeah, because they start poking fun at him for being bald, but obviously, like, he's like, I know you're insulting me, I just don't know what you're saying. You know, it's like insults, like the gesture of insulting someone, even if there's a language barrier, like it's a body language that you can pick up on. Him using his sword to attack Carly, but like King Shark ate it, but then like he ripped, like it sliced open clean Nanawe's like stomach and pulled the blade out, which I was like, because at first I was like, how the hell are you going to get your sword back? I thought it was just going to magically like phase out of him. Wasn't expecting it just to slice its way out of his stomach. I was like, that's interesting. And then he heals. So I'm like, well, because it also depends, because like they kind of were leaning into the whole notion of he kind of has indestructible skin in the movie because he was like bulletproof. So I don't know how that works for him in like typical canonical stuff, because he's not indestructible in the Harley Quinn animated series. So plus, we're also talking about magic, because even, like, Superman is, like, invulnerable to most things except for kryptonite and magic. Like, I don't think that comes up that often in a lot of stuff more recently. I don't think that's something that's even been dabbled with at all in My Adventures with Superman. But, like, the whole, like, yeah, like, he is vulnerable to magic. I just don't know how often that gets utilized against him in, like, the comics and stuff. But either way, that's why I'm wondering, like, because, like, I'm also wondering, are they leaning into the whole, like, Nanawe being, like, a god? Like, I don't know if they're leaning into that aspect. I mean, they did give him the name Nanawe, so that's, you know, so I'm curious to see how that, I don't know if we'll get any explanation for it. It might be just like I said, normal stuff wouldn't be able to affect him like that, but because it was basically a magical sword, it sliced through him. You have Rick Flag showing up trying to be the intermediary, and I love that he's like, yeah, I picked up a little bit of the language, but he picked up like colloquialisms and like the language from the orcs, so he's up there calling Cecil like a chicken shit and stuff like that, like saying all the terrible things. They're like, yo, it looks like home dude's getting pissed. Are you sure you know what you're saying? Like, should you really be talking to him using language you picked up from an orc? And Rick's like, it should be fine, right? I do like that we do have this thing where like Rick has become like this more sillier character, because he was very like stern and whatnot in the first Suicide Squad movie. To be fair, I've only seen it once, so I'm not remembering it as well. But obviously, he had a lot more comedic stuff in the Suicide Squad. To be fair, that was James Gunn, so it's like that movie has all of James Gunn's sensibilities as a filmmaker and writer. So it's like understandable why that character a lot of those characters, which might not have always been jokey, are jokey. So, but also it's like, right, we're putting him in an anime sense, so it's going to have that. He's going to be written in a very like had that anime like comedic sensibility as well. So the only reason why Cecil didn't really pop off on him was because Fiona like asked him like, I want to talk to them. So it's like, cool, come along. They meet with the Queen, who does your like, oh, like now we're able to understand each other type of situation, which I love. Once again, Clayface being like, oh my god, this is so cool. It's like that whole situation of you know, that like, oh, now we're able to understand each other, like using them, like immediately, kind of, not breaking the fourth wall, but it's like he's watched enough media to know, like, and understand Isekai stuff enough to be like, oh yeah, like this is the cliche thing that happens of like, oh, now we can translate between each other. And Rick Flag is trying to speak, you know, try to get the Queen's favor by like, hey, the reason why you've been losing against the Kingdom lately is because they've got new generals. Said generals are the previous Suicide Squatters that were there. It never even crossed my mind that, like, one of the people, it's the dude who I think we saw with the tank on his back. I think that was Ratcatcher. I was confusing Ratcatcher with, like, watching the intro again this episode, I was confusing Ratcatcher with the Thinker. He is in this, but it was just like, I was like, because I saw someone with like flowy hair kind of in a coat, and I thought that was the Thinker just without the helmet on. It's like, no, it looks like he probably is still bald in this maybe. But either way, maybe he traditionally is in the comics. But it makes a lot of sense that we're getting Ratcatcher. Granted, it's not Ratcatcher 2, it's OG Ratcatcher, who was in the Suicide Squad, just only in flashbacks, played by Taika Waititi. So I'm wondering, does he have his? I mean, I wonder, is Ratcatcher 2 typically his daughter in the comics, or was that something just for the movie? You know, adaptations do change stuff like that, so. But either way, it's like, you're right, the previous Suicide Squatters that came to this world with Rick Flag are the generals for the other side. So it's like, I mean, kind of makes a lot of sense. So, which also begs the question, makes you wonder, I'm like, are you going to end up killing the other Suicide Squatters? Like, is this Suicide Squad 2.0 going to kill the OGs? Which almost feels like that might be an almost wink and nod to the fact is we had Suicide Squad and we had the Suicide Squad, which was kind of its own thing, but was also kind of a bit of a soft reboot / sequel to Suicide Squad. So that's interesting. I don't know if that was like intentional in that capacity or not. I don't know. It's basically Suicide Squad versus Suicide Squad in an Isekai in that capacity. So either way, Peacemaker's the one who kind of suggested, like, right, we'll prove our loyalty to you by whatever battlefield you want us on, we'll go there, we'll win the fight. And Rick Flag gets captured as, like, collateral, and they're like, oh, bye-bye, Rick. And he's like, you guys are going to do this, right? You have to do this. Remember, I'm the only one that knows the location of the gate, so you need to come. You need to do this and make sure that I'm okay, like, so I don't lose my head. And it's like, yeah, okay, I guess we have to do this. So they get their equipment, they load up, and I do love that King Shark is literally just in overalls, and even Deadshot's like, is that all you really want to do? You also didn't say anything to Clayface, considering I mean, I guess he's a giant clay monster, so like, what are you going to do about it? But it's like, he's in like a suit that I'm like, what do you, kind of reminds me of, like, style wise, I mean, it gives like Michael Jackson vibes. I'm like, what, you know, but it also kind of makes me think of, I don't know why, like, it's not like an exact parallel, but it kind of makes me think of Sojiro from Persona 5. So I'm like, I don't know. It kind of gives me those vibes, but it's like, you don't have any complaints about him just in a suit. And it does make you wonder why King Shark, I mean, the movie, he was just running around in, like, I don't know if those were considered jorts or shorts or whatever, like, very Hulk-esque of, like, yeah, I don't think I'm wearing her pants. But it's like, yeah, overall, it kind of looks kind of cute on him, weirdly enough. I wonder what is, because obviously in the Harley Quinn animated series, he wears like full-blown clothes, like a hoodie and pants and shoes. Does he wear shoes? I actually don't know. Off the top of my head. I don't know if I've ever paid attention. I think he wears shoes, doesn't he? Maybe he does go around barefoot. I don't remember. But because I think even in the Flash TV show, they did him with the pants thing. I think. I wonder, does he typically have the pants on in like most? Because I don't even fully remember from the Suicide Squad game. I've never played it, but I saw, you know, trailers and stuff of it. But either way. But everyone's locked and loaded, equipment and stuff like that, and they go out there on the battlefield. They were sidelined by Cecil because he wants to prove himself. I mean, the Knights are not looked upon from the greatest perspective by the Queen, so he has extra motivation to prove himself, especially because I brought it up last episode. He seemed to be in a higher position, kind of like well regarded, and it seems like he fell off for whatever reason. Maybe we'll get that backstory, maybe we won't. But the squad was initially going like, right, just let them do their thing. Who cares? They're outmatched. Deadshot's got military history, so he's like, yeah, you're kind of stupid for charging in like that. I mean, you know, because it's not just like the Beastmen are just like regular attacking. They are, but there's also archers, so they have, you know, there is tactics there, and they have the overwhelming capabilities, plus they push through. But as Harley says, she's like, oh, I know firsthand brainwashing. She's like, yo, if you look at this, like, if they're standing back there, none of them have participated in a fight but already banged up, and their willingness to, like, keep charging forward. They don't seem reluctant to fight, but they are just, like, pushing past the pain. She's like, that's brainwashing 101, which I thought was so interesting, because I'm like, oh, it's Harley always, I mean, she becomes self-aware in the animated series, but I guess like I've never thought about like how she feels about the realization of like being controlled by the Joker. I mean, it just depends on where in stage of the continuity they're in their relationship, you know, where it's like her being like, oh, I kind of don't, oh, it's kind of effed up what he did, he manipulated me, but to see like that seemed like she was okay with it. You know, because she talked about being like, oh yeah, Harleen Quinzel, and kind of being kind of freed from that, you know. But that's what inspired Deadshot to be like, oh, I think I know who is responsible for this, and it turns out he was right. It's, as he calls him, Rat. He's like, yo, we're buddies, which I'll get to that in a second. But them kind of getting inside the fortress was because we kind of explore more and more how their powers, how everyone's powers and abilities have changed upon coming to this world. Like, for example, going back to Clayface, he now says like, right, I used to only be able to control my own clay. Now I can control anything with clay in it. So that's why he was able to rip a hole like into the side of like the fort / castle. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. And like I said, Harley, so far it seems like it's a strength boost. Like she gets like maybe like a temporary like superhuman strength boost. We haven't really gotten to the others on what they get from it, like Peacemaker or Deadshot, or I'd assume like the wound healing was like King Shark. Like that's kind of more of it. Maybe he has just like healing factor now, or maybe he had one to some small degree, but now it's like enhanced even more. It seems like your powers, whatever your, like I said, your fundamentals, whatever they were, they are heavily enhanced upon entering this world. But yeah, they like rip through all these beastmen and make their way to the top to confront Ratcatcher. And I love the whole like, oh, he's like, yo, Rat, it's your buddy. He's like, oh yeah, he's like, oh my god, me and Rat were cool. Like he's one of my few buddies. And we get a flashback to them in prison together. And then like, you know, he meant the best, and he thought he was doing right. But like Deadshot was kind of like the worst, was a plague on Ratcatcher's existence, because it's like, oh yeah, like I'm trying to defend you while talking all kinds of shit about you. And I also love the censorship of just like, oh yeah, like the Harley Quinn like little sticker kind of popping up above his mouth to kind of censor him. But also like the fact is that, like I said, he was trying to be nice, but it came off so wrong. It's like, oh, you have this food, let me give you this smelly cheese. They were going to throw it away, but here, I'll trade you. Then gave him a haircut to make him more intimidating. Got him basically kind of almost like a animal, kind of an Animal Planet style like rat porn, just because it's like, oh, this is what Ratcatcher's into. It's like you kind of made his existence hell, even though you thought you were being friends. You just kind of ruined everything, so he has nothing but negative opinion of you. So that sucks. I also really quickly forgot about this line of dialogue from Clayface when he was opening the wall of the fortress. That line of, you know, every protagonist needs their endearing flaws. He's like, think of like, you know, like Tom from Tom and Jerry. I'm like, the fucking random ass references, which once again, it's like, specifically you're referencing stuff that I think is all under the Warner Brothers umbrella, you know. But it turns out with Ratcatcher's enhancement, it isn't just about controlling rats. He can control, it seems like it's expanded to not only controlling animals, but he can also like heavily boost them. Like he can kind of drive them wild. Because we saw it with some of the Beastmen, like they actually transform and kind of evolved. It kind of makes me think of, oh god, this is kind of a spoiler. A certain character in Persona 5 has kind of a similar ability to kind of make people go crazy, and it enhances their power. It kind of feels like similar to that. Also, I was just thinking about it during the fight. It does seem like I might be getting my answer of, oh, is the helmet special or not? Which it turns out it's not. Like I said, that's why I'm like, I had to look into that. I brought it up previously, and I need to, specifically referencing Peacemaker's helmet, that I was wondering, like, does it have, like, in the TV show, he has different helmets with different abilities. So once again, I didn't know, and this is what I was talking about, I need to look into, whether or not that's something from the comics, or is that just something James Gunn made up for the TV show. Like, maybe all his helmets are regular, or maybe this one does have an ability, he just hasn't activated it yet, felt the need to. Because he's just so casually just beating everyone down and just shooting everything. So he is like even more so the muscle. I mean, there's plenty of muscle because you got him, you've got King Shark just like grabbing, ripping, and tossing people. I also love like later on like the kind of earth bending that the kind of earth bending that Clayface does because of his power. It also just randomly makes me think of Gaara from Naruto. Like it's not. I mean, it's that's sand versus clay, but it's still in the same wheelhouse. But it gives me Gaara vibes. Peacemaker was about to kill Ratcatcher, but Katana stepped in the way, which I love that Harley got pissed. It's like, oh, so she's here too. It's like, right. She doesn't know her by name. It's like, oh, you're that random masked lady with the sword that like captured me and put me in jail. So it's like, well, we know that because that Rick referenced her by name, but Harley didn't correlate the name because she doesn't know her name. So it's like, yeah, this is the first time I'm seeing her and being like, oh, that's the Katana. Well, not knowing like, oh, that's the person that Rick was referencing in the last episode about, because he thought like, oh, that was going to be your handler, which is so interesting that he was kind of like, oh, the person that's here is Katana. I'm like, well, why would you say Katana considering this episode they bring up the fact that it's like, oh, you came here with a squad that defected. Maybe Katana wasn't a part of that squad. Maybe she was sent here independently and then joined them for whatever reason. I also love that she's not just rocking her sword. She's rocking like, it's got to be like a magical sword. Because that's the thing of like, how much is like Cecil has his sword, like it's got to be a special sword. It isn't just like his magic that makes the sword special. Like it seems like she's got the double saber thing going on. It's like, it's got to be like a very rare special thing, which we haven't seen its abilities yet, so. But yeah, our Suicide Squad basically destroyed the building, which also feels reminiscent of the Suicide Squad when that place, I mean, they were going to blow up the place where Starro was being held anyway, but it was just like how that building was like completely demolished and was just like fucked. It just kind of gave that same, it's like, oh, maybe we went a little overboard. It's like, whatever, we won. But Cecil's pissed because it's like, this wasn't just originally their property. This was ours. We were actually going to retrieve it. It's like, who cares? You can repair it. It's fine. We won today. That's all that matters. So you should be grateful, So... But now it's kind of worked out to their benefit, and now the queen and her people see like, oh right, your Majesty, you sending them out there was a great idea. So I don't know if she has any ulterior motives. I guess she's supposed to be the parallel to Waller, where it's like, cool, you went from being controlled by one person to now being controlled by another. So how that works, once again, we're gonna find out who the real villain is, considering you have villains playing the role of good guys, and I don't know. How would the monster people feel from the prison finding out you were kind of, because like I said, like there were like beastmen among, because I think even the ogres and them are like considered beastmen too. So I don't, because they were like beast, they were the animal people in the prison that so. They're beastmen too, but it's like, once again, it's kind of like our heroes have it's like, right, we're just doing what we need to. We're going from like side to side just for the perspective of what benefits us. So we kicked it with everyone busting through the prison and making it our own, which makes you wonder what happens to that prison now. It's like, did the knights just leave that as is? Because it's like, those like creatures like run that place now. So we're just going to let that be, or what? I guess like the squad was like, nah, everybody be chill, we'll be back, or something. Like I don't know, like how that, we're just probably never going to explain it. It's just gonna be like, that situation is what it is, don't worry about it. I didn't talk about this in the previous episode too. I do love kind of that zoom out thing that they do, where they kind of show you the map of this world. It seems a very uniquely designed. I mean, like it's on those gears and stuff, and just like the aesthetic of it. I've assumed that is supposed to be a map of this world, but why it aesthetically looks like that, it might just be like that's actually what this world looks like. Just different fantasy worlds of like, oh yeah, this world is on top of a disc on the back of a turtle. God, what was that series that like? There's a series of books that the world exists like that. It's such an interesting thing, but it's like, yeah, maybe that's just aesthetically what this world looks like from the outside perspective. So, once again, it's a fantasy world. It can be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to be like, oh, like this world is actually straight up spherical, like Earth. Either way, I'm very excited to ultimately see where the next episode takes us with all of this. I'd assume going forward, and I think I might be right about this, there is going to be only one episode a week going forward. They just dropped the first 3 at once, but it's weekly going forward. And I saw 10, so if I end up being proven wrong, that's Wikipedia's fault, because Wikipedia has it labeled as like there's going to be 10 episodes. So we'll see, but I'm excited to see where the rest of the show ends up taking us. hopefully they can. They at this point they were down to 30 hours during this episode before their heads explode. So obviously they're going to get there in time, but I'm curious to see where all of this ends up taking us. We're not done with Ratcatcher because he's not dead. And Katana's like, yeah, this is the only time I'm going to bail you out because our Emperor, not too keen on people failing, but it's like Ratcatcher's like, oh, I'll prove them like how capable I am. I'm going to get my get back against Deadshot and his friends. So, but really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.